Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Reier on YouTube channel. I am Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, joined by Travis Reier. Be sure to like and subscribe to Reier on YouTube for every edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. Now in our, Travis, ninth season, maybe 10th. I lost count. This podcast has been through the trials and survived. And here we are. In 2024, midseason, the Crimson Tide coming off a big, costly loss in Knoxville at Tennessee, 24-17. The final score, second loss in a row in Knoxville for Alabama, second loss in 3 years in the series, and one that puts Alabama's postseason, or at least a memorable postseason, in great peril, Travis.
No doubt about it. It feels like a little bit like March Madness of a different sort here for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Feels like survive and advance at this point. And you still got a long way to go to the shoreline that is even a 12-team college football playoff with all the additional slots. Still a lot of work to do, starting with Missouri coming up this weekend in Tuscaloosa. Bye week probably coming at a good time before you go to Baton Rouge, but not a scenario we would have envisioned at all coming out of a win over the Georgia Bulldogs almost a month ago, but that feels almost like a year ago now.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Alabama, the last 3 weeks has not looked good. And, in both the Vanderbilt and South Carolina games, I came away thinking the bigger problem is defense, not offense. For it to get flipped around like it did against Tennessee, and look, I understand Alabama's defense gave up 24 points in the second half, really gave up the run in the second half. Defense kind of fell apart in the second half for Alabama. I get that. But overall, it was a better defensive performance than it was an offensive performance, Travis, which is a flip from Vanderbilt, and I think a flip from South Carolina too.
Yeah, it was at least one really good half of defensive football, whereas offensively, it never really got going. And yeah, I mean, you need to credit Tennessee for some of that because going back to the preseason, going back to the offseason, there was a buzz coming out of Knoxville that for a change, this Tennessee defense might be for real. I think in a lot of ways that's proven to be the case. But in that same first half last Saturday, Alabama offensively, it seemed like had chance after chance. And biggest issue I had, I tweeted this during the game, just wasteful, with opportunities, wasteful with situations. You got a play clock going down under 5. You got to take a timeout. You can't take delay of games when you're on the outer fringes of field goal territory and you're 7-0 and a chance to go up 2 scores, because when that game got to half last Saturday in Knoxville and it was 7-0 with everything that had transpired seemingly in favor of Alabama, you left the home team around long enough to end up getting KO'd yourself.
Yeah, that was the quietest I think I've ever heard Neyland Stadium in a first half, right? Seen a lot of quiet second halves up there with Alabama dominating under Nick Saban. Usually a lot of noise in the first half. I've never heard it so quiet there. And I obviously it got noisy in the second half when things got real. First half, they had seen this movie before. They had seen this Tennessee offense get shut out in the first half against Florida. They'd seen this Tennessee offense get shut out in the first half against Arkansas the week prior, and it happened again. Not a point for the Vols, 3 straight games, Travis, in the first half.
No, and look, we had seen Arkansas do the job against this Tennessee offense. Now that game was on the road for the Vols. I get that, but sure. And some of the mystique comes into play in that situation too, because, yes, Tennessee did win the game up there a couple of years ago, but between the recent struggles for this Tennessee offense and the absolute dominance of the Alabama Crimson Tide in this series going back to 2007, I'm sure there was a sense in that stadium Saturday that, well, here we go again, a big opportunity, a chance for Tennessee to show that it's really back, especially in relation to this particular series, and the Vols aren't going to get it done. Alabama, to me, offensively in the first half, felt like they were trying to win the game on every snap in the first half, a little anxious maybe in its approach. And, in the process, just didn't get enough done. And it goes back to some critical mistakes, too. I mean, we're going to talk about Jalen Milroe, I'm sure of that. Can't throw interceptions in the red zone, whether it's the first quarter or the fourth quarter, like we've seen the last 2 weeks. And I really thought Jalen, in picking Alabama, would be the difference. I like Jalen Milroe in a matchup with Nico, but give Iamaialava credit. Again, Alabama left him in this game long enough, didn't force Tennessee to panic offensively, could still come out in the second half and say, look, we're going to continue to work Dylan Sampson, who had the big fumble early in the game. And ultimately, that's when you saw the cracks in the Alabama defense start to show. And that's also due in part to because the offense had an opportunity again to put Tennessee offensively under some stress in the first half and didn't do it.
No, they didn't. Jalen Milroe looked like a different quarterback to me than he did against the University of Georgia. Like you said just a few weeks ago, after that Georgia game, I came on this pod and said, I think Milroe's taken a serious step forward with his game. He played phenomenally well against the University of Georgia. And 3 weeks later, looked like a different quarterback, not comfortable. I understand he was under pressure. I understand the pass protection was leaky, especially from the right side. I get all that, but you can go through the replay, which I did, Travis, and you can see plenty of throws where Milroe had time, was not under duress, and for whatever reason, didn't really always set his feet, didn't really always look comfortable, high on some ball behind guys. He was behind. He sailed a few balls high, but even more than that, he was throwing behind receivers quite a bit.
He was, and then comes the revisionist history that, well, he really hasn't played well this season. Well, he has played well. He didn't play well against South Carolina, I understand that, but he played great against Georgia, was the difference in that game in Tuscaloosa. Played great at Wisconsin. He's played some really good football. He's played well enough at times, as you said, to make you think that he really has taken some steps forward. And I do think in some ways he has improved. But there's no question these last couple of weeks, not even Vanderbilt, but South Carolina and Tennessee are kind of making you rethink that. And we've got a comment here in the show chat from Little Joe C. Chase, who asks, what's all this talk that Jalen Milroe is hurt? And I know that, players have been asked about this here in the last few days up there in Tuscaloosa. Kalen was asked about it essentially in the last couple of days. And it's been sort of this non-answer, kind of this vague, everybody's dealing with situations at this point. I understand that. But really, as you said, going back to the South Carolina game, especially late in that game, that just didn't look like the same guy we had seen previous to that closing stretch against the Gamecocks.
No, you're right. And should we be surprised? Because this isn't new. Last year, the juice in Jalen Milroe's legs went up and down a little bit. We saw it wane at times. We saw it rebound at times. So I don't know why anybody would expect any different. But yeah, I agree. He was not. He didn't look as explosive he didn't look as explosive against Tennessee as he had in some previous weeks. But based on last year, we should not necessarily expect him to slow down the rest of the year, because last year, just when you thought he was going to be a little on the slow side weekly, he'd find that spring in his step somewhere along the way and show it again. I mean, as late as November in 2023. So it could come back for him this week against Missouri. Who knows? But yeah, I didn't see the explosions. I thought that the quarterback wasn't really a sweep, but they were playing for Tennessee was playing for the sneak on that short yardage play. Jalen Milroe sees the Vols really crowd the center and decides to go C gap with it, or D gap to the left side, right? And really could have sprung. I think if that, you go back and watch that, I threw a clip on it on Twitter earlier today. Will Brooks, the Tennessee linebacker, made the shoestring tackle on Milroe like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think on that same play, with everything else being the same, 4 weeks ago against Georgia, that he's gone.
It felt that way. Like he's got a little more twitch, maybe a little more energy 3 or 4 weeks ago. And that was one of the concepts I did like that we saw from the Alabama offense in the game was look, Tennessee right now, defensive front wise, they got some real dudes. They got Alabama dudes on that defensive front right now. Alabama's got more of what Tennessee's had, just maybe solid, serviceable options across the defensive front. And so when you've got an undersized center like Parker Brailsford, and you're going to have one of those massive human beings that's you know, a real problem on the nose of a center like Parker Brailsford, go more off the edge with it. Maybe a little bit of a delayed approach. I really thought that was some good game planning by Nick Sheridan and the Alabama offense because you're right. Very early in the game, that had a chance to go the distance. It didn't. Um, but
Did you think that was like improvisational from
no,
Milroe, like it was a
I,
design sneak, or do you think it was
I thought
supposed
it
to
was.
go out?
I thought that was designed. My opinion was they had seen enough tape and they understood maybe some of the things they were dealing with on the interior, not just because of Brailsford, but Jaden Roberts right now isn't what he was a year ago at guard. So you can still have Tyler Booker in there, but if you're not exactly massive, you don't have Landon Dickerson at center right now. Parker Brailsford, I think, has played well, but he's a different type of center.
Right.
Um, and then Jaden's not 100%. If they're going to load it up from B gap to B gap in that situation, then you kind of got to make that adjustment. I thought that was really good. And you're right. I would have guessed a couple 3 weeks ago that Jalen maybe scores on that play.
Yeah, Brooks made a nice play. Robbie Oots had the blocking assignment on Will Brooks on the outside there, and he just the way Brooks played the block was really smart. He didn't go
Good
belly
player.
to he didn't go belly to belly with Oots because nobody wins belly to belly with Oots. He just kind of stung him and got off, and was able to make a dive at Milroe's cleats and just did trip him up. Elsewhere with the Alabama offense, Travis, we saw counts of anywhere from 18 to 20 targets to Ryan Williams. Kalen DeBoer saying that part of that was intentional, part of it just part of normal progressions. I thought Tennessee was physical with Ryan Williams intentionally, nothing dirty. But every time Tennessee got their hands on Ryan Williams, they either put a big shot on him or they slung him into the ground really hard. I don't know. I got the sense that Tennessee's secondary went in with the mindset that we're gonna test this guy's toughness today.
Well, which they should have, because if they don't do that, they can't cover Ryan Williams. As much as they wanted to play that type of coverage, they had to kind of put it in the hands of the officials too, right? If they're not calling us for holding or PI down the field, keep going with it. And, we saw the back shoulder attempts, the interception in the end zone there in the first half. And then Jalen comes back and hits it for a touchdown to Ryan. But that's not really Jalen's game either. I mean, think about it. How many back shoulders have we really seen Jalen even attempt the
Right.
last couple of years? And also, the short game issues, the quick game issues. He's not a great quick game executor off of RPO with the screens, ball placement, throwing guys into yards on the outside. That's not really his game either. If people are going to come up and challenge Ryan Williams, to me, it's just run the go just about 90% of the time.
Sure.
And that fits more what Jalen does well. Now, field position's part of that. But, they were trying back shoulders from midfield. If you're getting that look on the outside with Ryan Williams, just have him run the go and take your chances that way. But no, there was no question that they wanted Ryan to be a huge part of the game plan. And I thought I'll say this for Ryan Williams. I know his nickname is Hollywood, but that dude's got some Detroit toughs to him because he takes some shots
He took some
and
shots.
he keeps
Yes.
coming back. Um, Actually, it's something you'd like to see maybe more of at some of the skill positions because it seems like more than we have maybe in some previous years, we see backs go out of bounds, we see wide receivers go out of bounds. We just don't always see, in my opinion, maybe it's because there's not enough competition at some spots. Um, that sort of willingness to go get the extra 3, 4, 5 yards that we've seen maybe again in some previous teams.
How about the Alabama defense, Travis? We'll touch on that really quickly. That performance against Tennessee, again, kind of a tale of two halves for the Alabama defense. Great work in the first half. A lot of one-on-one wins up front for Alabama in the first half. They end up kind of falling apart in the second half. Secondary issues back there with injuries, Travis. A lot of problems back there, a lot of substitutes. Season high snaps for Bray Hubbard, season high snaps for King Mack, who I think was a third stringer working in this Alabama secondary. Tennessee not really able to take advantage early, certainly took some advantage late. Keon Sabb going out with an injury that looks like it's going to take a while. And I'm a Keon Sabb guy. I think that's a pretty big blow, Travis.
Yeah, it is. Give Bray Hubbard a lot of credit, though. Came in, what he end up with 9 tackles in the game.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting to see if or how much that impacts them this week because you're going against a couple of really good wide receivers in Burden and Weiss coming up from Missouri on Saturday. Brady Cook, a pretty capable quarterback, showed you some guts in the win over Auburn last Saturday. So it's going to be a challenge on the outside, and not just because it looks like Keon Sabb is out for the foreseeable future. You think about LSU in a few weeks and making that trip to Baton Rouge and potentially not having Sabb against an offense like that with Garrett Nussmeier and those weapons, Kyron Lacey and those guys. So Bray Hubbard, I think, in a lot of ways is going to prove capable. But you said it too. It still continues to be a little bit of a revolving door based on rotation and based on some injuries. King Mack, you said it, third guy up at the Husky. I didn't think on a couple of the biggest plays in the second half that he or Jalen Mbakwe necessarily had awful coverage. They got beat by a little bit, and that's all it took. Tennessee's receivers made plays down the field, and that went a long way in being the difference.
Yeah, yeah. Mac. One of the issues I thought with Mac, there were a couple times where Tennessee got the corner turned on Mac in the run game, and that was an issue. And you've mentioned it on the podcast for weeks now. Setting the edge against the run has been a problem for this defense. Problem for Alabama again against Tennessee on certain runs. I think Mac got the corner turned on him one time. The play that Alabama recovered, the fumble that Alabama recovered in the first half, that nobody had, and it was got to be frustrating to Kane Womack, Travis, when you look at some of these issues. Is it's not like you've got somebody in position and they're just missing an open field tackle. There's nobody there.
Yeah, vacant. The easy access on some of these runs is what's, I'm sure for him, befuddling, to put it probably kindly. I thought, though, in the first half, edge setting on that sort of counter action that Tennessee likes to run where they'll bring the pullers.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Alabama did a pretty good job on that. You're right. Sampson hit him even on the fumble. But really, other than that, I thought they did a pretty good job of dealing with that action. I thought they showed a willingness to play more disciplined in the run game. I thought they showed a willingness to strike people. I thought the tackling was better. It seemed like at times they were getting more people to the ball, but then you start losing some people too. And you think, wow, you lose some people in the secondary. That's a big problem in terms of pass coverage. Sometimes it can be a bigger problem in terms of run support. So it's multiple things that you have to take into account there. It just in the second half, it just felt like once it started to unravel and Tennessee was able to get that run game going with Sampson, And even Nico hit him with a couple of them. Yeah, it was going to be a problem to get enough stops. Although I'll say this, the Alabama defense got off the field late, gave the offense an opportunity to at least get this game extended. Bray Hubbard made a really nice play on a third down to, kind of force that situation. But the offense just couldn't get it done. We've heard Kalen talk about it, the lack of complementary football. This was an issue for this team a year ago, and it continues to be one with the new regime.
Yeah, let's touch on how the last final minutes played out, maybe situationally, Travis. Obviously, you had a huge penalty, an inexplicable penalty, really, on Kendrick Law, 15-yard personal foul that takes you from a 4th and 7 to a 4th and 22. I'm not going to say a 4th and 7 is manageable. That's too strong a word. You don't even call a 3rd and 7 necessarily manageable, but 4th and 7, you got some plays, at least in the playbook, that you can work with on 4th and 7. There's nothing in the playbook for 4th and 22.
No, and I'll say this, I thought that should have been offsetting. If you listen to the broadcast or watched it, Matt Austin, who is the review official for ESPN, there were about 3 or 4 calls there in the second half where he said the crew basically just got it flat out wrong. But you can't put yourself in that position there either. Love Kendrick, love what he brings. I thought it was important that he was back for this game. But that, as you said, that basically eliminates, that takes care of the decision-making process for you. And then, because the offense just wasn't at a high level, Jalen wasn't performing at a high level, just seeing kind of the close-ups of Jalen there in the final 90 seconds, 2 minutes, didn't inspire a lot of confidence. The thing about Jalen Milroe is, it seems like no matter what the noise is around him or has been over the last season and a half, Jalen Milroe always, at least seemingly, has had a lot of confidence and belief in himself. Saturday down the stretch, especially as that game wore on, that's maybe the first time I've gotten the sense that Jalen didn't have a lot of belief in himself and or his teammates. And that was a situation where if you didn't have it, it was going to be tough to get it done.
It didn't look like everything was right mentally with Jalen Milroe on
No.
Saturday for sure, especially toward the end of the game, no doubt about it. Yeah, I thought that was an issue. Penalties on the whole, big issue. 15 of them, Travis. Alabama is now, I think, top 10 in the entire FBS in penalties per game. 30 going back 2 years. Alabama's last 2 trips to Knoxville, 32 flags combined.
Which also answers the revisionist history angle that comes out, though, in year one under Kalen DeBoer of this never happened on the net.
Right.
Well, you just said it. The last
Yeah.
time they went up there, it was a huge problem. The last time I think they went to A&M in 2021, it was a huge problem. So it has happened pre Kalen DeBoer, but for this team specifically, it's just seemingly, you would think it would be more of a problem early in the season, right? But it seems like it's becoming more of a problem as the season goes along, which you wouldn't maybe anticipate as much.
Yeah. Speaking of discipline, what did you make of the jump shots on the
Well, I
quarterback?
read your column in the
Yeah,
Tuscaloosa
yeah.
News, so I know what you made of the air balls
Yeah.
from Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard. Look, I know neither one of us want to be, stand out in the yard and scream at the sky guy, old guy. So my biggest issue is that it's not a football functional reaction to a play.
Right.
And I say that because you can say, well, and I know you wrote about this. Well, you can say it's a sneak, and those guys on the outside, they don't have any real responsibility on a sneak. But let's just say Jalen gets stuffed and Jalen bounces off the pile, and now he's running to the right side
Yeah.
behind your jump shooters
Which I've seen,
who aren't in football mode.
He's bounced a sneak or two.
exactly, and he's capable, and this is fourth down.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest problem with it. And I thought it was a very interesting response from Nick Sheridan in response to, I guess, your question
Why? Yeah,
on
actually, it was
Monday.
actually somebody else asked that question.
Okay, all right,
But it was coming for Kalen if it had not come for Nick Sheridan.
yeah, and like you, I think wrote, it could have been a case of Nick just covering for his players there, but I didn't get the sense that was the case,
I
and
didn't either.
so that's my biggest thing about that, though, Chase, is that I, to me, it's you're just taking for granted a situation, a huge situation that may require two of your players to potentially need to play football if
Yeah.
things change during the course of the play. And it kind of goes back to what I said about the first half offensively. To me, it was just like it was wasteful, it was arrogant, just sort of the disregard for how precious in a game like that every yard and every play is. Every snap you get is precious
Yeah.
in a game like that. And Alabama just acted like it had house money and spades to play with. And as we found out, it did not.
No, no, it didn't. And I think I'm not I can't say, to say, hey, there's a time and a place for everything, that doesn't apply because there's no time and place for that. Because like what you just said, what if the thing gets bounced? That said, there are better times and there are times that are worse than others, right? You're
When
beating
you do that one, when you're kneeling it
Mercer.
down,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you're kneeling
exactly.
it down,
Right, right.
if you do it, and even then, I don't know, but
On a day when you can't move the ball on the road, in Knoxville, that's the day it comes out. What?
yeah, well, ball don't lie
No,
sometimes, as they say,
no.
so.
Ah, all
But
right.
we've been assured here in the last, I guess, here today that things are going to get cleaned up. Now the attention to detail is going to
Yeah,
take place. It wasn't
that's
the first loss; it's the second loss. So all those things are going to get cleaned up. I tweeted today, and this is kind of off topic, but this through 7 games, what it kind of feels to me like? Kind of feels like Dennis Erickson, Miami, to me. Remember when Dennis Erickson took over for Jimmy Johnson at
right,
Miami?
right.
And look, Dennis Erickson went on to win 2 national championships down there. Now, different era. Miami at that point, it was a lot easier to do. Miami wasn't even in the ACC at that point. It was essentially beat Florida State and
Mhm.
maybe Notre Dame back then, and you were playing for a national championship. So it's certainly not apples to apples by any means. But it just sort of the fit, the vibe, and again, Dennis Erickson was a damn good football coach, and I think Kalen DeBoer is too. It's just interesting watching this sort of take place in real time.
Any similarities between Dennis Erickson and our guy Bobby Collins? Says
Oh, jeez.
kind of the same thing, right? Got on that 500-mile-an-hour train that Ron Meyer had left behind in Dallas. That Bobby.
Yeah, yeah. It is. It's going to be fascinating to watch play out. By the way, I'm not off of Kalen DeBoer at all. Okay, I'm just talking about is again Dennis Erickson won 2 national titles at Miami, so this thing still has a real opportunity to work out well for both
Right.
parties. Dennis Erickson also, after 6 years, ended up leaving Miami to become the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. Another scenario I could see for perhaps Kalen DeBoer down the road at some point, but there is so much that still needs to happen. Starting this week with Missouri, which I see Alabama, 13.5 point favorite?
It's
Chase,
a
does
big
that seem
number.
like a lot?
Big, yes, yes. Seems like a way lot. Seems like way. Doesn't seem to me like Alabama should be even double-digit favorites in this game. I'm not even sure Alabama should be a touchdown favorite in this game. So I may be.
It must be related to Brady Cook's health,
I got.
because
Yeah, gotta
but
be
but even with that,
big number. It's a
it's a
big
lot.
number.
It's a lot. It's a
So
lot.
uh, Talkin Tide podcast on the Reier on YouTube channel. Give it a like, give it a subscribe at Reier on YouTube. Going to bounce around the SEC here these last couple of minutes, Travis, as we always do. Some scores around the SEC. Georgia over Texas 30-15, handled business against those Longhorns. The fans tossing, ringing in their first SEC season, slinging debris on the field over a call. Missouri knocks off Auburn. We should hit on that game since Alabama's playing Missouri next. Brady Cook to the hospital and back. Can touch on that as well. You just alluded to that. Florida knocks off Kentucky in a big way, beat them by 4 touchdowns. South Carolina blows out OU. But let's run back to Missouri since that's Alabama's next opponent. Travis, what'd you make of the win over the Auburn Tigers?
Yeah, Missouri struggling right now. Had gotten blasted out at A&M, and then, boy, that game against Auburn last weekend, it looked done for a good bit of it. But Brady Cook is able to come back into the game, get the job done. It's hard to make a lot out of Missouri right now. I do think Cook is the kind of guy that if you leave him around, as Auburn found out with the cast of characters he has to go with him, you can have a problem if you do that, like you've done the last really 3 games, 4 games now. And you've been fortunate really in a lot of ways to go 2-2 through that stretch if you're Alabama. So Alabama, again, to me, is the better team this week. How that actually plays out on the field, I guess we'll find out on Saturday afternoon. I'll say this. Good for Billy Napier, good for Florida. That DJ Lagway, true freshman quarterback for Florida. You talk about guys when you see they have it. He looks like he has it. Hate it for Graham Mertz, who's out for the season for the Gators. And then Georgia, man. You talk about a different looking team than the one Alabama saw in Tuscaloosa 3 or 4 weeks ago. And most of that has to do with defense because Michael Williams looks like he's fully back now. And they just wrecked Texas for a lot of that game. Give Texas credit for making it interesting there in the second half. But I thought it was pretty clear that Georgia really on both lines of scrimmage, the dominant team.
Beat them up. Went to Arch for a minute. Right back to Quinn, so it's gonna I'm not sure that's over. Travis, Texas loses another game. Do we see Arch?
Geez, it's tough because even if Texas loses another game, and they go to Vanderbilt and see my guy Diego, on Saturday, so we'll see what happens. I think Alabama did teams like Texas and some others some favors, though, by losing in Nashville.
Right.
And especially with Texas already coming off a loss, it should be a pretty engaged Texas team going to Nashville. But, yeah, I think that's going to be interesting with Quinn and Arch, because Arch brings a different dynamic to that thing, too. Like, you can think that against a defense like Georgia's, if it's at full strength or close to it, that you can sit in the pocket with a guy and have success, but that can be very, very tough. And at least Arch brings you some of that athleticism that you can do some things by design with him to kind of keep him out of harm's way.
That is going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast on the Reier on YouTube channel. Be sure to rejoin us when we reconvene following Alabama's upcoming game, homecoming at home against Missouri. We'll recap that one. And, of course, on the backside of that, Travis, it'll be an idle week followed by a big trip to Baton Rouge for the Crimson Tide.
No doubt about it. Survive and advance for the 2-loss Crimson Tide. Tex Tider checking in here in the show chat. Appreciate it, Tex, who reminds the folks, hit that thumbs up. We like those likes, too, here on the show. So if you do that, we'd appreciate that as well. Always a good time, Chase.
Enjoyed it, Travis. We'll talk to you next time.